only a few times have I actually seen something like out in 3D space, and it's usually like before a major traumatic event. So I grew up in a small town in Georgia called Greensboro. And the first recollection I have is, I think I was about 4. We lived in this really, really old, like duplex. It was one of those old antebellum homes that had been turned into multiple units, two units. I was a little bit kid, and the house had a real weird configuration. You had to walk through every room to get to the back, you know. And I remember one part you had to walk from my mother's bedroom into the kitchen, and then there was a stairwell there that went up to, it was supposed to be the attic, but it was also a bedroom. And every time I would walk there, I would always feel something, you know. As a little kid, you know, you're a little more sensitive to all that stuff anyway, and I kept feeling like someone was there. And one day I looked up at the top of the stairs and I saw an old woman, not like the way you know people look. She looked like what you see in traditional, you know, ghost stories or whatever. It was a little translucent, and but she was so like clear in the way you could see her. She had long white hair that was kind of stringy, and she was wearing like an old, like a nightgown or something that looked like she had made it herself. And I looked at her, and she just looked at me, and she said, not with her words, I could hear it in my head, her say, am I frightening you? And I said, yes, a little bit, back in my head. And she said, well, would you like for me to leave? And I said, yes. And she said, okay. And then she just like disappeared, and then it never felt weird in that little stairwell again. And I never saw her again, never. That's like that's only happened like maybe once or twice my whole life. After that, I never saw them again like that, and I'm glad I don't, because you know, it's hard to like, you know, go around in life when you're seeing stuff like that. And I think it's just a natural process for humans as their brains age, you know. Certain things get walled off, you know, and you just have to try and connect into that stuff in a different way. Other examples, I would hear things and I would, you know, say them to people, like, I think I was about 6 or 7, and I was telling my dad about how things were going to be when I grew up, as far as politics and things like that, you know, which was stuff that, it was just like, I just kind of blurted it out. And he looked at me so concerned, like, what is wrong with you, kind of a look. That's when I realized, maybe I shouldn't be saying these things, you know. And that's when I started to just pull in, you know, the information, or become more introverted with it, and just used it.
What were you saying? Like, can you give?
I was talking about how when I grew up, I said when I'm old is what I said. I said the government's going to be so different. It's going to be like a business. Like everything is like business people and business this and business that, and like they're going to end up like making everybody like part of their business, something like that. It was basically talking about, you know, how it was going to change, and it was going to be less about like public good and more about like business good. And he just thought that was really strange. And to me, it was like I just seen a movie, and so I was just relaying what the movie was saying. But after that, I didn't really talk about that kind of stuff anymore with any of them. My family's very religious, you know, and they're more, my mom in particular, she, you know, that side of her family is more fundamentalist Christian, and, you know, so that kind of thing is, you know, seen as evil or whatever. And then on top of that, my sexuality was another aspect of that, you know, to, you know. So I was very much an introverted type of person who was more into the observation of people and things, and I would use my gifts in ways to, you know, make sure I didn't get into any kind of trouble, or to guide my own life, and to help other people too, in whatever way I could. When I started openly doing this kind of thing, you know, I realized that what my intent all along was, when it came to using the gifts, was about helping people find their emotional center. It's not always about connecting with someone who passed away and giving information to validate that they're there. Sometimes that happens, but sometimes it's about, helping them to stay focused in life, or to make sure they don't lose their sense of grounding, make sure that they continue doing things that are keeping them grounded. It could just be so many things. And so that's what my intent has been with it. And I'm not the kind of person to go actively like set up and try and make this into a business or anything. That's just not me. I know I wouldn't be happy with that. I want to just live a life, and, if something comes up where someone needs help or something, then I do it. I was at the grocery store and I heard this girl at the checkout, and her grandmother, this woman who I felt was her grandmother, had popped in. And, instead of like just relaying that information like you would in some reality show, I just told her, I said, I bet your grandmother would be so proud of you, and you're going to college and stuff, and blah, blah, blah. And that's what I heard her say in my head. And she goes, well, yeah, I've been thinking about going to college. I said, well, you should go, Your grandmother would want. And she goes, my grandmother, she just passed away like 2 weeks before, she told me. And that's just one example of how I will do it. And my point to say that is that, there are people out there who, they can use their gifts in that way. You use them in your own unique way. It doesn't have to be the way you see it being done in society, the business or with a web page, or, just use your gifts though, because they will internalize. And they can, for some people, if you don't use them, that energy will stay in. For the most part, it works, in a lot of ways. Sometimes I'll hear a word or a few words that will then and I'll just relay those words to people. It'll be very simple that way. Or sometimes I'll get a visual. Sometimes I'll just have a feeling. It's like there's no words in my head or anything. I'll just start spontaneously talking, and as long as I don't hinder that process, it'll flow out really well. If my brain starts to take over though, it can throw that process off if I'm doing the more, clairsentience, I think is the word. Sometimes I can have feelings. I'll feel something someone felt, like pain or something. Only a few times have I actually seen something out in 3D space. And it's usually before a major traumatic event. There was one time when I was sitting at home, this is many years ago, back when Sandy Hook happened here in the United States, the shooting with all the little kids. And I saw a little girl, about 4 years old, run across my living room, and I could only see her from, the chest up. Everything else was just, there's nothing there. And she had little, bows in her hair right up here, little pigtails or something, I think. And she ran across the room. And I was like, what is that about? And then the next morning I woke up and all these little kids, 3 and 4 years old, had been shot. So, that was one example. But that's pretty rare. And it tends to be when some major event's going to happen. If I'm openly and actively using my gifts, because I can taper some of that back too if I need to. I think that the best way for me to approach it is to have no walls, no boundaries in a sense of being boxed into a certain question or a certain expectation. Because expectation, it's a kind of energy that comes with expectation that really creates this hesitation, like a wall in a sense too, in a wall that kind of keeps energy from flowing, because you're kind of focused on that question. Have you ever thought about that? When you're trying to write something, or you're reading something, or you're trying to find your keys, and you're so focused on where are those keys that you don't realize they were in your hand, And the same thing can kind of come through with messages and stuff. It's not about focusing on that one thing. It's about something else that's maybe tied to that. Like the reason you didn't even know your keys were there is because you're so distracted and stressed out by something.
And you were talking about also being skeptic yourself. Would you like to share that?
Yeah. So my skepticism was. So I have this side of my brain that's very. I want to know, how does that work? Where's that coming from? I think because I grew up, watching a lot of science programs and things, and, a lot of my family on my dad's side are teachers and things. And so it's about, when you're teaching, you have to make sure that what you're telling people is the truth. and that it can be, sourced from somewhere or whatever. And so mediumship and stuff, it's like, I mean, the only way you can get, know whether you're on track or not is to give information to people that's either helping them in some way, enlightening them in some way, or giving them validation of something that helps them to let go of something that they're holding on to. I think it's healthy, but like with everything, it's about moderation, right? Skepticism, and for me, it was important to note that skepticism was about fueling also, am I connecting with the right person, right energy, you know what I mean? But aside from that, the results will really tell you, when you're speaking to someone, if you were in the right place, because something will happen that will make them feel better. So if a person doesn't have a healthy sense of skepticism in something, they can become so trusting and so basing everything on faith that they lose their sense of grounding with reality. And now they get led down a path that's probably very harmful to themselves or to someone else. You can see that all the time in politics, or in religion, and in spirituality too. So you need to question things. You need to ask.
Some people might think, I would love to be extrasensory,
Yeah, well, it can be a lot. I'll tell you that. I mean, what I was talking about is, when it comes to the term we use, empathic. That's where you can pick up on energy that is emotional. People's emotional energy. I mean, it just kind of floats out there like radio waves or whatever. And some people just seem to be more sensitive to that. I mean, and I think that when an empath is, being guided, by their family or by whomever, that it's important for them to be reminded of that fact, because there's so many people out there who are empathic and they pick up on emotions and they think that they're their own, they take ownership of them, and then they start behaving or reacting to those emotions that then shapes their whole life in a different way than if they had known that it wasn't theirs, and then they could have learned to let it go, And that's happened to me before, And you can see it happening to other people. I mean, whenever there's something, kind of, crazy going on out in the environment, you'll notice that other people will start becoming more sensitive or more, to each other or whatever. And then sometimes it can even create, social instability, when the energy gets to be so big, because we're all empathic to varying degrees, But empaths, it can affect them even just in the day-to-day. And I don't say that to try and scare people away from it or make them think people who might be empathic have this burden or anything. Because, it's not. It's just a part of how you are. It's like breathing and stuff. You just have to learn how to adapt to it and to recognize. And that's where the skepticism that I was talking about earlier kind of helps with grounding you in something. Ask the question, well, is this mine? Be skeptical of that feeling, And it'll help to pull you back from that, Because sometimes there are things that are yours. There's a lot going on in your life or whatever. But a lot of the times, it's not. And so you have to be aware of that.
Would you like to share the experience when you got traumatized?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I would hold names and things like that. But there was a person who I had given a reading to, or it was just spontaneous. Which that's how it works with me many times. I'll just suddenly, I'm like, oh my God, I need to call so-and-so, And this was someone who I had known only we had friended on Facebook, and they had worked with Elisa a little bit, or just knew Elisa. And just one day out of the blue, I had never talked to them before, and I got their phone number and from someone, and I knew I needed to call them, and so I called them and relayed this message about how they needed to go and see this, this grandmother figure for them, someone who had raised them and stuff, and they validated all that information. And because it seemed like the message was, about helping them to find closure with this person or something within themselves, some kind of closure. And so, after the call and stuff, a couple of weeks later, they went and visited their grandmother. And then when they came back, they died. And it was so traumatizing to me, because I was like, thinking that human side of me was thinking, what if I had never delivered the message? Would they have still died, Would, did what happened? I just didn't know all the information. I just felt like participating in that. And how did they die?
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure if it was, a health-related issue or if it was, self-inflicted. I've never heard either way. And, the family, they were not, I'm not going to go and ask them those kinds of things. But it just felt, the part of me, there was a part of me that felt like it was, self-inflicted or possibly could have been. But I don't know that for sure, Or, heart issue or something. I don't know. All I know is that,
You felt responsible a little bit?
Yeah, in some way. And I don't know. As I'm talking about it, it's like I'm thinking, well, that doesn't seem like you need to feel responsible for that. But, because they did get their closure and stuff, and they posted pictures and showed them with their grandmother and all this, and they looked so happy and stuff. But I guess it made me start to think about, how in life, everything, it's like waves that crash on each other. Everything interacts with everything else. And, you have the ability to not necessarily know how it's going to react, how something is going to interact with something else, but you have the ability to choose whether you're going to participate and how. Point to all of this is that it's about having a reverence for it and a respect for all of it, and to make sure that your intent is for whatever's going to be most helpful to people. Mm-hmm. You have to learn how to balance giving your gifts while also making sure that you're not pulling too much energy away from yourself. Because my health became very negatively affected by doing too much. It's like being at an amusement park or something. Sometimes, you get so wrapped up in it that you just keep going, and you don't realize that you're actually pulling all your life energy away. And, over time, the readings will suffer, and you will suffer health-wise too. Because I did, what got me into some of this, even before doing readings openly, I had some very serious health issues. And still do, where I was unable to work, and some of that openly doing readings and stuff for people after I could no longer work was inhibiting my ability. It was actually setting me back in some ways, So you have to make sure you find balance with that too. There have been several mediums who have worked with Elisa who have passed away, and some of them had health issues. Whoa. And it's not to say that, what they did was wrong, that maybe they gave too much, but I'm just saying, because you don't know all the details of all of that. But I'm just saying, and of course their life purpose could have been that at the end of their life they give all this out, kind of like a supernova, just poof, all that energy comes out. So it could have been some of that too, but I think you have to remember to balance those gifts, make sure, I'll say this is something my guides told me several years ago. Because I was asking them this question because I was going through a lot of physical pain and things and had learned some new issues, health issues. And they told me, I asked them, I said, well, what is enough? How do I know what is enough? And they said, enough is a balance between give and take that does not create suffering, either for yourself or for someone else. And I was like, oh, wow. So that's a mantra that I try to follow. If you're giving readings and you're starting to suffer in the process, you need to back away. If you're giving readings and now suddenly the readings are off kilter and they're maybe creating some suffering for someone that was actually not necessary, because sometimes it is necessary, then you need to step away. You need to rebalance. Everyone really is a medium or an empath or whatever. It's just to varying degrees. Now, the people who get labeled as fake or disingenuous, sometimes it just has to do with they don't have any confidence in themselves, and then they're projecting this image of where they're trying to overcompensate, and then they get judged as disingenuous or fake, right? Or maybe they give too much, and now suddenly all their readings are off kilter or whatever. Or they've always felt like they weren't seen in life, and so now they feel like they want to put themselves on this stage to get some attention for themselves because they just feel like they're not getting it. So, all those things can happen, and all that kind of stuff. The people that maybe get labeled that, to some degree also might be people who are putting themselves in front of the actual work. The work is still there, but, they're kind of in front of it,
Yeah.
So
the ego kind of
Yeah, it can, and I just think all of those kinds of people. I think just naturally over time that kind of thing will start to work itself out. That something will happen where, maybe the work will start to become more the front issue, or they'll find some kind of balance where they can put themselves with the work, so it's a win-win. There are plenty of people that happens with, or something happens that trips them up and really makes them back away from it for a while and reassess, and that kind of thing, and then maybe they come back stronger or they go into something else.
What do you think is so special about Erik?
Well, one thing is he's very easy to stay connected to. He seems to connect with people in a way that other spirits don't, because other spirits, like with your grandmother, for instance, she'll or with most every spirit, really, they'll pop in, and then if you don't go with that energy, then it'll just kind of fade away. Eric's not been like that. He's he'll pop in, and it'll be very strong, and it's he's right there, right up in your face, and his energy's always fun and laughing, but then it's kind of a Trojan horse, because then he'll kind of come in and whap you with something you needed to know. It's he'll disarm you with the humor and then come in and say something that's impactful. Yeah. Because then you'll listen, because, got to create a connection. But I think that the thing that makes him so different is his ability to just connect with people in such a strong way. And I don't really know how to word it any other way. It's just, for me personally, and I don't know how it is with other people, but it's there's such a strong familiarity, I don't know, like some kind of a weird, a family bond, or I don't know. And I think with other people that's happened too, And he's been one of the few spirits that I've seen manipulate things in the environment. Yeah. He hasn't done that with me for a long time, but he's done that before in the beginning, years ago when I first met his mom. He would make the lights turn on. I remember I was in the bathroom, standing at the sink, and he said, "Hey, dude, watch this." And suddenly, the lights over my toilet flickered 3 times. And I told him in my head, I said, that's neat that, every ghost does that. And he said, "Oh, really?" And then my toilet flushed by itself. And I was like, now that's impressive, because there's no electricity involved with that. Or I'd be at the grocery store, and I'd suddenly find myself walking down aisles. I never go down, because I always stay on the edges of the grocery store, because that's where all the healthy stuff is usually. And I found myself walking down the cereal aisle, and I'd be standing in front of the cereal, and he'd be like, "I want that," just to give me an idea of what it is he liked, And it would be Cookie Crisp or Chocula or something. And then later I'd go tell his mother, and she'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's his favorite." Or one time I was walking down the candy aisle, and which I never do, but I just found myself down the candy aisle, and a bag of the red cherry Twizzlers. Do you know what Twizzlers are? Yeah. They just flew off the shelf, somebody had hit it and knocked it, and it landed right in my cart. And there were other people in front of me and behind me, and they saw it. And this one man went like that, and I was just and then I just walked off. I mean, I've never had any spirit ever do anything like that. It's all fun, mischief type stuff, and maybe that's just part of his magic, I guess. I don't know, that, because no other spirit really does that. Most of the time, they're just you can feel their connection with people and stuff. I do, but you're just kind of an intermediary. With Erik, it's you feel like you're become part of him or something. I don't know. It's very interesting.